Thank you again for attending the IT Audit Controls Design live webinar and making IT audits simple. That's our goal today. And as we go into this live webinar presentation, I'm sure that you will receive some information that will help you to have a wonderful IT audit experience. Now, it was one January morning several years ago that my family and I, we packed our suitcases and we packed everything in there and we came to this wonderful country of Canada. Now, when we boarded the plane, we had every bit of courage that things will work out. But when the airport doors opened, it was a different sight that January. It looked pretty much like this. There were snow everywhere, and this was the first time we were seeing snow. But like all conditions in life, you can plan and plan, but things will work out differently. But you have to adjust to that plan. And so we had the opportunity of being in this wonderful place despite the snowy condition at the time. And we know that we will make the best use of this opportunity. Now, what is your biggest struggle? Type it in the chat. What is your biggest struggle? So, I am going to give you value over the next 30 to 45 minutes. And I have a question for you. Are you going to stay with me? Just type it in the chat box. Are you going to stay with me? 30 to 45 minutes here. Now, on this webinar, we want to cover three areas. We want to cover our 4-step framework. Then I'll have a special opportunity for you and your next steps. So our mission is to serve 100,000 business leaders globally who are ready to design effective information technology controls that support financial reporting so that you can reduce your risk of cyber breaches. And there are so many cyber breaches out there right now. And it is our belief that once you have IT controls that are designed effectively, that you have done the base work needed to reduce your risk of cyber breaches. So, we have had the pleasure of working with several companies over the years in various capacities. You see big four companies, you see insurance companies, universities, technology companies, oil and gas, bus company, even the government we have the pleasure of working with in various capacities. And I dare say many of these opportunities came as a result of the relationship between PwC and myself in assisting these wonderful companies in designing effective IT controls that support financial reporting, and at the same time to ensure that they are operating in an effective manner to reduce misstatements. So, how did we come with our four-step framework? How did we come to do that? It came about as a result of working with these companies over the years. We have dialed it down to these four areas, these four steps, and we dub the four steps UPCO. It's like you're going up a step. So users, passwords, change management, ops, these are the four steps that we want to cover today in our live webinar. And each step has different components to them that we will go through over the next 30 to 45 minutes. So let's go. So it's our promise that at the end of this webinar and at the end of sharing with you our four-step framework, that you will reduce IT risk to financial reporting and you will enhance your IT audit experience. So if it is that we are not able to deliver on this promise, we'll do all that it will take to ensure that we live up to this promise to you. Reduce IT risk to financial reporting and to enhance your IT audit experience. So the first step in our framework, user access management. Now, there are four controls that everyone should have in their industry, in their organization. Everyone has users, whether they have the title of CEO or an intern. Everyone has an user, has a user account. Now, to get really simple, when users are added to the account, there are procedures that need to be followed. When users are deactivated, there are also procedures that need to be followed. When users are their rights, it needs to be reviewed, and privileged activities of user activity, the privileged user activities, those need to be reviewed as well. So those are the four controls that we are going to go through. Now, the first one, in granting users access to your application or to your system, there, of course, needs to be some way of communicating this request to the persons, most likely your IT persons that do the creation of the accounts. There could be an email request, or a form that is submitted. And in this case, in this time, electronic form is more likely to be submitted. Now, one thing to be clear on is that all requests for a user account, that request must have management approval for every new ID that is on a particular application and a particular system. And one thing to note is that the user, whatever was requested on the user access form, that is the permissions or the access rights that should be applied to the account, to the user account. And the next thing is that the approval should be received before the account is set up in the system. And if you, as a business leader, have these in place, then more than likely you will pass this control. Next, when users are removed, there are some controls or some things that need to be in place so that the users are removed in a reasonable time frame. And 24 hours, both physical and logical, is a good time to remove the access. Now, in this time, most organizations use a directory service where if the person being terminated no if the person being terminated, their access is known before time, then that can be pre-configured in the network so that it is an automatic process, the removal of the access for that account. Now, when it comes to your users in the systems, there is a point in time where the users, their access rights need to be reviewed, need to be reviewed to ensure that whatever access rights that they have, they still require those access rights to continue performing the activities that they are asked to perform. So one control here that needs to be in place is that the application owners need to request the user listing from the application that they are responsible for in order to have the revalidation process done. And there must be a way for the application owner to verify the user listing. Now, it cannot be that the application owner is totally dependent on the IT personnel to just give them the listing and say, okay, it's coming from IT, therefore the information that is provided is accurate and complete. No, no, your auditor will not appreciate that. So there should be a way that the application owner knows that the list, the user list that is provided is accurate and complete. One thing to note is that the application owner could ask the IT personnel to provide the script or the context in which the information was retrieved from the system, and they walk through to see if it is reasonable what has been performed. And the revalidation exercise should be done in a timely manner so that it does not flow over to the following year. So if the permissions needs to be adjusted, then it should be done within the time frame of a year so that the whatever needs to be done is done. If users need to be removed because they are no longer doing that particular task requiring that information or that access, then that is removed. And this serves as a catch-all control where if something is missed during the termination phase or the access granting phase, then this serves as a catch-all to catch any of those that have been missed. And then how about the privileged users, those users who have more than the normal access within your applications and within your operating systems or database? Triggers could be set up on sensitive processes or critical database tables or records to ensure that whatever is being done by these users, these privileged users, are within their job duties. And I know that there can be a lot of activities or alerts that will be sent out once this is set up. However, just be mindful of what is critical to your business that you need to have an alert on, and then you can set that up. Now, after that is setting it up is not the final step. There needs to be a regular review of those activities to ensure that there are no unauthorized users doing anything that they are not supposed to do. The review process is the control. So if it is not reviewed, then you do not have a control there, and it will make things difficult for you. So do you find the information valuable so far? Type it in the chat. Do you find the information valuable so far? Let me know in the chat if the information so far has been valuable. And let's see if we have anyone typing in the chat right now. Let's carry on. So step number 2 in our 4-step framework is password management and configuration. Password management and configuration. There are 4 areas we want to look on: the single sign-on authentication, direct application authentication. We look at some legacy accounts and legacy application, and we look at configuration change monitoring. So in order to look at single sign-on authentication, passwords must be composed in a certain way. So the minimum password length should be set up, usually 8 characters or more. The minimum password age, that means how long would a user need to keep their password before they are allowed to change it. And 1 day usually is appropriate here. The maximum password expiration, which means how long the password would be valid for. Valid for 90 days is acceptable. And the password complexity, which is any 3 of the 4 components or characteristics of password complexity. That is an uppercase letter, a lowercase letter, a number, or a special character, any 3 of those 4. And I know that there are some applications that they're not able to enforce this in their system, in their configuration. So what do we do about that? Well, let's find out later on. A companion to the password composition is the account lockout policy. And this goes hand in hand with the password policy. So there are 3 areas to look at: the number of failed login attempts, usually 3 to 4 attempts, the lockout duration, and the best practice is that the account is locked until the administrator unlocks it, and the reset lockout counter, usually 30 minutes. So once all of that is in place, then we can look at single sign-on. It's like your passport into all the other applications that are single sign-on. So one control to bear in mind is that the application screen, the configuration screen within that application that is single sign-on, it needs to show that the application itself is using the network to authenticate the user. This is something that the external auditor will look for when they are assessing if this account, or if this application rather, is using single sign-on. And there are some applications, for example, the OS 400, the operating system rather, that are integrated with the application, or the application is integrated with the operating system. They do not use the single sign-on, but rather they have their own authentication that needs to be entered once you log into the application. So the configuration screen of the password parameters need to be set up in a way that it shows that the password parameters, they actually meet the password policy that is set up for the enterprise. And when it comes on to legacy application, these are really those applications and systems that they are no longer supported by the vendor, and the password standard cannot be enforced. And there are many applications and systems that I've seen during over the years that do not that fall into this category. And some form of terminal server solution, for example, Citrix, can be used to encapsulate these legacy applications so that there is some form of control there that whoever logs in to the legacy application, you can know from the logs of the terminal server solution the user activity to ensure that whoever is logged on is really the right person that is logging on. So the review of those logs for user activity is critical there. And if you, as a business owner or leader, is able to demonstrate that you have such a control in place, then you would have passed this control. And in this section about reviewing the configuration for changes, so every enterprise would normally have a baseline setup for whatever they have configured for the password. And triggers should be set up on the system to alert on the changes from the baseline so that they are aware, the enterprise is aware of when changes are made. And changes that are made need to be approved by management. So is this something you find actionable so far, whatever we have discussed? Is this something that you find actionable? Type it in the chat and let us know. Let me know that you're still there with me. Type it in the chat. Okay, let's move on. And step number 3 in our 4-step framework, change management. Now, there are some areas that once in place for change management, you would have the right controls in place. So change requester, the developer of that change, the tester of that change, implementer of that change, that's one area. The approvals of the test results that are done, that's another area. Approval before the changes are migrated into the production environment. How about emergency changes? There are times when emergency changes have to be done and approved to get the enterprise back online as quickly as possible. And there are post implementation reviews that are critical in the change management process. Now, in regards to the change requester, the developer, the tester, and the implementer, usually these should be separate persons doing each function. So the requester at times can be the tester as well. You can think of it in the case of the end user of the application maybe saying, oh, this function in the application is giving this issue, or can we have this feature inside this application? Now, when everything is done, it is this requester that will test to ensure that whatever was requested is what is developed by the developer. So in this case, the requester can be the tester. Another thing, the developer must not be the final tester or the implementer, because it is the end user who will be using the application. So they are the ones that needs to be testing it. And also, it is a different personnel that needs to be implementing what has been developed. But what if you have a small shop? What do? Well, there could be another ID setup that is only released by management to the developer to implement whatever changes need to be implemented. And once that is documented somewhere and the activities are reviewed on a periodic basis, then we have a control there that can be relied on. And this is where we talk about, in terms of the test results, there should be end user testing. And these testing should be documented and management approve of the test results to ensure that the test results are according to what is in the test plans. Another control that needs to be in place is management approval of tests of the tested version. So whatever was signed off on, there should be management approval of that particular version to ensure that is what gets into the production environment. Now, what if there are emergencies that occur? And of course, it happens. Now, in terms of emergency changes, there could be a special ID that is used for that emergency purpose. And once there is documentation and management approval, then you have an OK control there. Also, after the fact, when everything in the enterprise is now stabilized, the documentation and approval of what was done needs to be in place so that when the external auditor comes in, they'll have that information ready at hand. And this is one area where most organizations fail at, is the periodic review of post-implementation. Now, how this should be done is that there is a review of the files or objects that are associated with the programs, the program files that are changed. And in doing so, you as an enterprise can capture those changes that did not pass through the change management process. and you have the change advisory board review these changes to ensure that they actually went through the process, and this is documented so that when the external auditor comes in, the information can be provided at hand to them. So let me know, what is your number one takeaway right now? Type it in the chat box. What is your number one takeaway right now? I look forward to seeing your number one takeaway so that we can share and have fun together. All right. So the fourth step in our four-step framework is computer operations. All enterprises have computer operations, and these are some of the critical controls, or these are the controls that once you have them in place, they can help you with this control. So configuration, or the configuring of flags in the application to alert when there are errors while processing the data. That's critical there, because if your application do not tell you when something is wrong, and you have to depend on the users to tell you, then you may be losing out right there. So let's go in and see what we have here. So all incidents or errors should be documented in your incident management software. That way you have a central repository where all this information can be analyzed over time to see the trends that are occurring in the enterprise, and management is able to look into these trends to understand what is happening. Is there a root cause for these number of incidents? The other control is that the incidents should be resolved according to the enterprise's incident management policy. Most organizations have an have a service level agreement where they categorize each incident, whether priority 1, priority 2, priority 3, or 4, and there is a defined time frame when each priority type incident is resolved. That is usually documented or is a part of the incident management policy. Now you may say, what about the cyber incident policy? This can be a subset of the incident management policy, and it's addressed in a similar way. Now, when you configure the application to alert on errors, the ability to change these flags should be restricted to authorized persons, so that when these incidents occur, you will know as an enterprise, and that none of the incidents would be suppressed by any person with the privilege to change those. So you want to ensure that that is there. When it comes on to your backups, having backups, whether daily, weekly, or quarterly, is perfectly fine. Whatever is configured in the backup software should reflect what is actually taking place. And if there is a failure in any of these backup sequence, then there should be some mechanism to have it rerun the next day. The most important criteria in having an organization or an enterprise recover is that the backups are able to be restored in a timely manner. So there should be regular restoration tests done for the data backups. So you cannot have your backups, and when it's time for you to use the information from the backups, they are not they are not available for you to use. So there should be regular testing of the data backups to ensure that they are there, ready to be used to get back to normal operations in your business within a reasonable time frame. Now, all this should be documented. The results should be documented. And you find that once you have this information documented, that the external auditor will be able to 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 rely on the information that you have there. So how do you feel now after hearing all this information? Type it in the chat box. How do you feel now about this information? It sounds like we have covered the core IT controls that support financial reporting. Let me just grab a drink of water here. So we can actually stop the webinar right now because all the information that is needed, that you need, is I have given that to you. But here's what we have covered today in the presentation. We have covered our 4-step framework, user pass change ops. That's a nice little phrase that you can remember. Users pass change ops. And we have an acronym, UPCO. So we spoke about user access management and the several controls that are under this step. The granting of users, the removal of users, access rights, review of these users, whether they are normal users or privileged users, and the activities of privileged users. Over in step 2 of password management and configuration, we spoke about several components of the password standard that needs to be in place. We spoke about the account lockout policy, and we spoke about single sign-on authentication, and also the direct application authentication. We also looked on legacy applications because, face it, lots of organizations have these in their enterprise. And we spoke on the monitoring of the changes of these password parameters. Then in step 2, we looked on change management, the change management process. We spoke to the fact that there are different roles that are involved here: the developer of the change, the tester of the change, the implementer of the change. And we alluded to the fact that there should be some separation, we call that segregation of duties between these individuals. We said that the developer should not be the implementer of the change into production, and also that there should be management approvals of the test results and also the changes that are going into production itself. And we also spoke to the post-implementation review, where there are changes that can go undetected and not pass through the change management application. So we spoke about how we can do that in capturing those changes to ensure that everything is above board and management has approved all the changes that are there. Then we moved on to the fourth step, the computer operations. We said that changes that backups should be done according to what is configured, and there should be testing of those backups to ensure that the enterprise is able to recover from a business disruptive event. So that's our 4-step framework: users pass change ups, that will help you to reduce IT risk, to financial reporting, and also to enhance your IT audit experience. Now, was our time together meaningful? Was our time together meaningful? Do you feel more comfortable now about IT controls? We have absolute confidence that you can take all this information that we have presented to you in this webinar, and on your own you can go out and implement this in your enterprise. We are also certain that the information that we have provided to you, you can, with the time and effort that you have and your resources, you can go and implement this the way that most people will never be able to do. But what if there was another option? An option that allowed us to work together at this, a chance to go deeper than we can do in 1 hour connecting one time. If we had such an option for you, would you love to hear about it? And what it could do for you? Let me know in the chat. Would you love to hear about it? So you may be asking, what is your investment? Right now, the only investment that we ask is 15 minutes of your time. Schedule a call with us today, 15 minutes, where we get to find out what's happening in your business. It may not be in your business what's happening in your life right now. Let's schedule a 15-minute call today, and that's the link where you can go ahead and schedule. And let's have a chat on this. Now, coming to Canada has been a very rewarding experience. I was able to work among talented people in various organizations. And so far, I have increased in knowledge in many areas. And I want to be able to help you where that is concerned. There are 4 distinct seasons that I enjoy here in Canada: spring, summer, autumn, and winter. So it is not all white snow as many would imagine, but there are 4 distinct seasons that are very wonderful for you to experience. And you can experience that through your involvement with me. So remember, go ahead and schedule your 15-minute call today and let us work together in finding the solution to your most pressing problem right now. Thank you for attending, and I hope you find this webinar valuable. Go ahead and schedule your 15-minute call today.